Hi everyone, I'm Celeste and I'm a DevRel from Virtuals Protocol. So the last time we actually went through Game Lite, and in today's video we wanted to go through not just Game Lite but also Game Sandbox. In fact, we're going to do some sort of comparison because a bunch of you have actually asked us like why this interface is like less familiar to them, whereas they've actually used the Sandbox a little bit more. So just doing a comparison between the two types of sandboxes. Okay. Game Lite, which is what we've been going through, all right, is a sandbox which allows you to experiment with agentic functions when you don't actually have an agent yet. So in a sense, you can test out agentic functions, you can kind of run simulations and all that, but you can do all of that without an actual agent. Now we understand that launching an agent is complicated, and therefore we created this tool so that you guys can do some testing before actually launching an agent. And from an interface perspective, okay, we've gone through this previously, but maybe I'll just kind of talk about this very briefly since the interface has changed a little bit. Okay, in Game Lite, we can configure the agent goal, the agent description. Now this is slightly new, but you can also configure the workers. You can configure tweet enrichment, and then you can choose the various functions you would like to select, as well as add some custom functions. You can also import and export your agent JSON file in case you want to save your configurations. And you can also reset the session if you need to. Okay. And then, of course, you can run simulations. So actually, you can do quite a fair bit of stuff on Game Lite. Okay. And all of this doesn't require launching an agent. And then next, I'll talk about the agent sandbox. Now, the agent sandbox is something which requires an agent beforehand. And in order to configure that, you'll need to go to the app.virtuals.io page, okay? And from there, you can click on profile and then actually go on to configure, select your agent, configure its Twitter functionality, okay? And that will actually bring you to the agent sandbox, okay? So the agent sandbox looks quite similar, but it's not 100% the same, okay? It has some additional functionality. Now you can configure your goal, description. The agent knowledge is not available in Game Lite. Now you can actually configure this in the agent sandbox. You can configure the heartbeat. This is actually no longer, this doesn't really exist in the Game Lite anymore, okay? You can configure the workers, a few other things like agent directions, wallets, API access. Okay, so this is a little bit different. This is actually where you can access your API key for the hosted agent. For those of you who actually have been using the SDK, okay, and maybe let me share the link right here. One moment. Okay, so for those of you who have been using the Python SDK, you'll notice that there is a hosted game. Okay, there's a hosted game folder. Okay, and the API key which you extract from the agent sandbox is actually used to run the hosted agent if you like to play around with the hosted agent SDK and actually use a more code-based interface to interact with your agent. Just a side note here, but some of you also have asked, if you're running the game, the code in the game folder, you don't actually require that particular API key. The API key you will require is slightly different. Okay, so this is where you will access the API key. You will notice that this location is slightly different from where it used to be. Now it's actually right here. I believe it used to be in the top right-hand corner. All right. And you can also set up a few things around X, tweet enrichment, browsing lists, okay, your X API key configurations if you want to bring your own keys. You can also choose your functions for simulation. Okay, you can add your custom functions. Now, all of these are quite similar. You can import and export your agent, reset the sandbox session, and you can also run simulations. Now, one key thing to highlight here is that you can also deploy your agent. Now, this is kind of like a sandbox versus production kind of setting. So take for example, I'm configuring my agent right now. I change my goal, etc. I click save. After when I'm actually kind of done, configuring all of these, the usual practice you recommend is to actually run some simulations. Okay, run some simulations, and if your simulations work pretty well, you'll probably want to deploy your agent. Now, deploying your agent basically means that you are actually reflecting all of these changes into production. Okay, so we click on deploy, and now it says, oh, agent deployed to production. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, what this means is that your agent settings are basically deployed to Twitter, because this is where you configure Twitter, right, in your sandbox. Okay, so your agent is actually deployed to Twitter, and all of its new goals, description, and all that are actually like live. So in Twitter itself, all of these changes are actually reflected. Now, if you click to view live version, this would actually show you exactly what's reflected in Twitter in production. Okay, and you notice that all of these settings are not really editable, because these are like, this is just this interface, like the live kind of interface is actually just to show you what's deployed to Twitter. It's not really meant to be edited, because this is in production. Okay. And if you want to go back to Sandbox, which is an editable interface to actually tweak some settings and actually save, you can click back on Sandbox. Okay, and this is where you can kind of tweak all of these. And if you want to make any changes, you can do some edits and then click save and then click on deploy again. Okay, deploy agent. Okay, so just to quickly sum up, the biggest key differences between Game Lite, okay, and Agent Sandbox or Game Sandbox, okay, is that firstly, you'll be able to access your API key here, and secondly, you'll be able to kind of deploy your agent, because there is actually an agent here. So first thing, SDK, API key access, and second thing, being able to deploy an agent. Yep, so that's it. This is just a quick video to kind of compare Game Lite and Agent Sandbox. See you guys next time.